Dr. Castleberry here with part 2 of our week 4 discussion. We're taking student questions and we're playing with them, seeing what we got here, right? We're creating a dialogue using mass communication, right? Because we're trying to blur boundaries. All right, so we got kind of hung up on some of Megan's feedback there. But there's one more thing that comes to mind, very interesting thought, and then we're going to work through some of these other questions. And so, yeah, in fact, Megan says, or writes, rather, she writes, this is just a thought I had while reading this chapter and how media influences art and even the way we identify our own personas through art on our bodies. I'm sure there are a multitude of people who have symbols and quotes from the Hunger Games, tie into one of our readings this week, right? Hunger Games. I'm sure there are a multitude of people who have symbols and quotes from the Hunger Games as tattoos because they absorbed the semiotics of the books and movies. Well, you're tapping into something very true there. In fact, fan communities, there's a distinction between an audience that likes something and a fan, right? A fan has a deeper level of association, and oftentimes it's an emotional connection to the media text or media artifact of choice, and so that's why we lump fans into this deeper category of consumption. Because yes, they do connect, and some even find ways of expressing that by putting these signs and symbols of art and artifacts on their bodies, right? And so something comes to mind. I don't know how many Hunger Games artifacts I've seen permanently imprinted on a person, but there are a lot of Harry Potter fanatics that will. I've seen that lightning symbol tattoo on a number of people over the years, but that's a very basic symbol. You can think about, they even sell maybe like the Lord of the Rings ring. I used to see that in what's it called, Sky Mall magazine, on the airplane. You could buy your own version of the ring or the sword, right? I don't, never got one of those, but doesn't mean I don't want one. But I did like looking at them in the magazines on the plane. Although I don't like picking up magazines on planes anymore, right? Now that I know more about that invisible culture happening on airplanes. Anyway, so Harry Potter, Lord of the Rings, Star Wars, of course. I mean, we can't escape this franchise. Apparently, it's never going away. And I've seen images and shows and things of people attaching like R2-D2 on them, full renderings of characters, and they could be human characters, they could be fiction. I mean, they're all fiction, but like otherworldly creatures, droids, and so on. Fandom goes deep. I think of something like even professional wrestling, right? People will get all kinds of speaking of symbols and symbol systems, professional wrestling as a kind of athletic art form, athletic entertainment. I think it brands itself sometimes, at least one company, as sports entertainment. This is definitely a unique way to think about signs and symbols and the power they have, right? Wrestling is all about repetition, and sort of like the repetition of these utterances and phrases, catchphrases, quotations, symbols, right? You have everything from like the entrance, the monologue on the microphone, and so it's definitely a genre of entertainment that is extremely self-aware and relies deeply on some coded signs and symbols to depict its ongoing narratives, right? To communicate its media product to the audience, to the consumer. So yeah, that's something to think about there. Oh no, whose questions were these? William had some great questions this week. William asked a question about relating again to the Hunger Hunger Gangs. Hungry Gangs. The Hunger Gang. The Hunger Games chapter out of Media Communication Theory and Millennial Popular Culture, one of our textbooks we're going to use, and across multiple classes. Anyway, question on that reading. Wilson discusses the term panem, used in the Latin phrase panem et circenses. Siri, Alexa, whichever one of you, help me out. Which means bread and circuses. I can't read English. And so, the questions brought up about how this form of government relates, and so what comes to mind ultimately here, what's in play is that it's named after this famous quotation, right, of bread and circuses. The idea that if the government will give the masses these basic forms of food and pleasure, food and entertainment, then they're going to stay satisfied. And as the allegory of the Hunger Games suggests, and it's not the only popular culture artifact or mythos to suggest this. In fact, it goes beyond myth. That if you just provide the masses these items, then they will perhaps stay distracted while you're doing other devious things, right? Securing policies that benefit, only the elite or whatever. We can take that in a number of directions. So once again, a reading that comes to mind, William, is Guy Debord's Society of the Spectacle from early 80s. And that's a book that's really philosophizing about where we continue to head, right? What is happening when media becomes so seductive in all its forms and facets, right? When everyone can relate to some kind of media, and what happens when we get across that threshold and we're all just kind of distracted, beyond recognition. Another popular book that came out of the mid 80s around that same time from American author was Shoot. The title of the book is Amusing Ourselves to Death, and I can't believe I'm blanking on this scholar's name. It is, awkward silence, Neil Postman. Neil Postman's Amusing Ourselves to Death. And he was raising a lot of concerns then. Now, many media scholars since that point have said, simmer down now, simmer down. It's not that bad, right? It's like, the water's not too warm, lobster frog, but it is something to think about, right? What is the end game when everything becomes media culture, right? How, at what point, right? That's too big a question, right? Quit trying to, you're going to give us all a headache, William. I'm kidding. There's some follow-up questions. I love them about de Saussure as well as Charles Peirce, and really, explore, comparison, contrast, and break them down, or what's the difference, or who's better, and what's the impact here. I like where you're thinking with this, but something I think it's important to recognize for us all, right? This is a great pause for reflection here, is that theorists, when we study theory of communication, of media, of philosophy, of sociology, of whatever, theorists are looking to do a couple of things, right? They're looking to leave their mark. They're looking to identify phenomenon and find new ways to talk about them, and ideally find new ways to talk about them, or possibly critique them, so that we can progress toward a better end, right? So that we can understand, and then ultimately so that we can progress in a positive direction, okay? And so sometimes you can think of theorists as, these, when we come across them in introductory textbooks like what we mostly have, you're getting like the breadcrumbs, sprinkles of some of their impressions they left. And it's important to just think about the context of, when they were writing and thinking and speaking about ideas, and then who came after them and what kinds of ideas did they add to the conversation. And ultimately, this teaches us that the more we study, the more we add to our own understanding, and then possibly we add to that field of discussion, of critical thought, and so on, right? And this is what we call a discourse. A discourse, this ongoing conversational way in which we make sense of our own surroundings and maybe the world at large, with the hope that we can better it as a result. Okay, so discuss, oh my goodness, lighting, color, music, sound effects, how they can affect the movie or TV show. Well, we know they can, right? All these products, these ingredients come together, and they can produce something very meaningful, very persuasive, right? So this reminds me of our video discussion from week 3. I think about the power of theme songs and TV shows. Destiny talked about Full House, and I think she even talked a little bit about like Game of Thrones. Like both of those texts come to mind as like signature theme songs that put you in a certain mood, they get you ready, right? Theme songs are really savvy in that way, that they prepare us with certain expectations for what this show or this text is going to be about or is about. And so they definitely set a mood for us. I'm going to table that question. I think it's going to tie in nicely with some discussion we can have a little bit later on with you all for this week. Let's see. Stereotypes. Absolutely. We talked about that a little bit already, and how it's the over-reliance on them that can lead to some negative consequences. But they can serve a purpose. They can be useful, but that's that over-reliance on stereotyping that is lazy. Let's see. Gonna tie in again to that question we're gonna have as a class. Destiny asks, how might a movie differ with or without music? And follow-up question 1 would be, have you ever seen a silent film? Right? Well, although that was silent in terms of dialogue and sound effects, many of the silent features actually had music written to accompany them. Like someone would play a piano in the initial theaters to the footage that you would see above. But have you ever watched a film, maybe something you've seen it before, and you've got it on mute, and it just doesn't have that impact that it did? Or can you think of a media artifact that remained potent even though you had maybe the sound turned down or something like that? You had to turn the closed captions on, like, shh, I don't want to wake anybody up. That's interesting. Similarly, Ashley was commenting on some of those same themes, right? Music and lighting. And music definitely does a great job of connecting motion or tapping into emotion, whereas lighting, for sure, lighting sets a mood, right? Lighting and mood are closely associated. So nice job, Ashley, with picking up on those themes. You can think about lighting in any series. What does it mean when a set or a scene is very dark, right? What kinds of connections do we make? It's not just about, how does it make us feel, but what is it signifying? What is it suggesting? What is it communicating? For the lights to be low, if to be dark is to be unclear, mysterious, right? Think about the film genre, the film noir, right? These sort of like 40s detective movies, and one of the genre conventions that recurred was the use of smoke or smoking, right? And so like a lot of characters, right, it's very habitual then for characters to be smoking. Everyone smoked then, but it also signified something for like either the detective figure or the femme fatale, that to smoke was to both conceal and reveal, right? It's foggy. So we're getting some mystery to it. And most noir films are steeped in mystery. So that's something to think about as we move forward. Okay, there are some other questions I'd love to get to, but we're almost out on time here. I love talking about these themes with you all. Thank you. Look forward to more.